The morning sun shined brightly over London as crowds of tourists gathered near Buckingham Palace. Among them was Tom Wilson, a loud American tourist wearing a bright Hawaiian shirt and cargo shorts. Tom had saved for 2 years to visit London, and today was his big day to see the famous royal guards. Tom pushed his way through the crowd, his large camera hanging around his neck. "Excuse me, coming through," he shouted, not really caring if people moved or not. He bumped into several people, ignoring their annoyed looks. All Tom cared about was getting the perfect photo to show off back home in Texas. The royal guard stood perfectly still outside the palace gates. They wore their famous red coats and tall black bearskin hats. Their faces showed no emotion as they stared straight ahead. These guards were soldiers from real British Army regiments, but many tourists saw them only as photo props. "Look at them. They don't even blink," Tom said loudly to no one in particular. "I wonder if they're even real people." He laughed at his own joke while taking dozens of photos. Not far from Tom stood an elderly man named George Harris. George was 78 years old and had served in the British Army for over 30 years. He wore a simple gray coat with military service pins on the lapel. George visited the palace once a month out of respect for the institution he had served his whole life. He stood quietly, leaning on his wooden cane, watching the guards with deep respect. The crowd grew larger as the morning went on. People from all over the world pressed forward, trying to get a better view. Children sat on their parents' shoulders. Tour guides held up colored flags so their groups wouldn't get lost. The air filled with excited chatter in many languages. Tom grew impatient. He had been in London for 3 days already and still hadn't gotten what he called a brag-worthy photo. He wanted something special to post online. Maybe a silly pose next to a guard or something that would make his friends jealous. "These people need to move," Tom muttered. He spotted a small opening in the crowd near the front and decided to make his move. He pushed forward roughly, stepping on toes and elbowing ribs. People protested, but Tom ignored them. As he shoved his way forward, he noticed George standing in a good spot near the fence. The old man was watching the guards with a small smile, lost in his memories of military service. "Hey, old-timer," Tom called out. "Mind if I squeeze in there? I need a better angle for my photo." George turned slowly and looked at Tom. "There's plenty of room for everyone, young man. Just be patient and respectful." Tom didn't like this answer. He had paid good money for this vacation and wasn't going to let some old guy lecture him about respect. The changing of the guard ceremony was about to begin, and Tom wanted to be in front. "Look, Grandpa, I didn't fly 5,000 miles to stand in the back," Tom said. "I just need 5 minutes in your spot." George shook his head. "Young man, these guards deserve our respect. They're not here for entertainment. They're soldiers doing their duty." This made Tom angry. Who was this old man to tell him what to do? A tour group behind Tom suddenly surged forward, pushing him slightly. Instead of steadying himself, Tom deliberately leaned into the push and bumped hard into George. The elderly man lost his balance. His cane slipped on the pavement, and he began to fall backward. His eyes widened in surprise and fear as he felt himself going down. The crowd gasped as George started to fall right in front of one of the royal guards who had been standing completely still like a statue until this moment. No one expected what would happen next. Time seemed to slow down as George Harris fell backward. His cane clattered to the ground, and his arms waved helplessly in the air. The crowd watched in shock, some people covering their mouths with their hands. Tom stood there with a smirk on his face, not reaching out to help. But then something unexpected happened. The royal guard, who had been standing completely still like a statue, suddenly moved. In one swift motion, he stepped forward and caught George before the old man hit the ground. The guard's quick reflexes surprised everyone watching. "Sir, are you all right?" the guard asked in a deep, concerned voice. He helped George stand up straight again and picked up his fallen cane. George nodded, a bit shaken but grateful. "Thank you, soldier. I'm fine." His voice trembled slightly as he steadied himself. The guard, whose name was James Blackwood, looked up at Tom with stern eyes. His face was serious under his tall black hat. "Sir, what do you think you're doing?" he asked Tom in a firm voice that carried authority. Tom's smirk disappeared. He hadn't expected the guard to break character and speak. In fact, he thought the guards weren't allowed to move or talk at all while on duty. It was an accident," Tom lied, taking a step back. But several people in the crowd spoke up at once. "No, it wasn't," said a woman with a German accent. "I saw him push the old man on purpose." "Me too," added a teenage boy who had recorded the whole thing on his phone. "I got it all on video." The crowd began to murmur angrily. Some people pointed at Tom, and others moved closer to George to see if he needed more help. 2 other royal guards appeared and joined James. "What's happening here, Blackwood?" asked one of the new guards. "This man," James said, pointing at Tom, "deliberately pushed this elderly gentleman." Tom's face turned red. He looked around at the angry crowd and the 3 royal guards now focusing on him. For the first time, he felt scared. "Look, everyone needs to calm down. It was just a little push. No big deal." George Harris straightened his coat and looked Tom in the eye. "Young man, respect isn't just a word. It's how we treat each other, especially those who are different from us." James the guard nodded at George's words. Then he spoke into his radio, calling for assistance. Within minutes, 2 police officers arrived on the scene. The crowd parted to let them through. "What seems to be the problem?" asked the first officer, a tall woman with short brown hair. James explained what had happened while the second officer took notes. The teenage boy stepped forward and offered to show his video as proof. After watching it, the officers turned to Tom. "Sir, we need you to come with us," said the female officer. "Pushing an elderly person is assault, and we take that very seriously in the United Kingdom." Tom's mouth fell open. "Assault? But that's crazy. I barely touched him." The second officer took Tom by the arm. "Sir, please come with us without making a scene." As the officers led Tom away, the crowd applauded. Some people patted George on the shoulder. A palace staff member approached George with a wheelchair. "Mr. Harris, would you please come with me?" she said kindly. "The captain would like to speak with you, and we'd like our doctor to check you over." George nodded, surprised they knew his name. The staff member leaned closer and whispered, "We recognize you from your monthly visits, sir. Your service to the crown has not been forgotten." James the guard gave George a respectful nod before returning to his post. As George was wheeled away, he wondered what would happen next to the rude American tourist who had pushed him. Little did he know, Tom's troubles were just beginning. Tom sat in a small room at the police station near Buckingham Palace. The walls were plain white, and there was only a table and 3 chairs. His camera and phone had been taken when he arrived. He tapped his fingers nervously on the table. "This is ridiculous," he muttered to himself. "All this fuss over a little push." The door opened, and a serious-looking police officer walked in with a folder. He sat down across from Tom. "Mr. Wilson, I'm Detective Inspector Roberts," the officer said. "Do you understand why you're here today?" Tom rolled his eyes. "Because I accidentally bumped into some old guy. It's being blown way out of proportion." Detective Roberts opened the folder and turned a small screen toward Tom. "This is footage from security cameras at the palace, plus videos from 3 tourists' phones." He pressed play. Tom's mouth fell open as he watched himself clearly pushing George Harris on purpose. From this angle, there was no denying what he had done. The video showed everything. His angry face, the deliberate shove, and the elderly man starting to fall. "That doesn't look like an accident to me, Mr. Wilson," said the detective. "And the man you pushed wasn't just some old guy. That was Lieutenant Colonel George Harris, decorated war hero and former personal guard to the royal family." Tom's face went pale. I didn't know who he was." "Would it have mattered?" asked the detective. Is pushing elderly people acceptable where you come from? Meanwhile, at a private room inside Buckingham Palace, George Harris sat in a comfortable chair drinking tea. His right hip hurt a bit from the near fall, but otherwise, he was fine. A palace doctor had checked him over and found no serious injuries. The door opened, and a tall man in a royal staff uniform entered. "Colonel Harris, I hope you're feeling better," he said with a slight bow. "I'm quite all right, thank you," George replied. "Though I must say, this is more attention than I expected for a little incident." The staff member smiled. "Sir, when someone who has served the crown as long as you have is disrespected on palace grounds, we take it very seriously." He handed George an envelope with the royal seal. "His Majesty was informed of the incident and asked me to give you this personal note. He also extends an invitation for you to attend the private garden party next month." George's hands trembled as he accepted the envelope. In his 30 years of service, he had met the royal family many times, but a personal note from the king was unexpected. Back at the police station, Tom was being informed of the seriousness of his situation. "Mr. Wilson, you're being charged with assault on a vulnerable person," Detective Roberts explained. "Your tourist visa may be revoked, and you could face a substantial fine or even jail time." Tom's arrogant attitude finally crumbled. "Jail time? But I'm supposed to fly home next week. I have a job to get back to." "You should have thought about that before pushing a 78-year-old war hero," the detective replied coldly. "And I should inform you that this incident has already gone viral online." He turned his computer screen to show Tom several news websites and social media posts. The headlines read, "Disrespectful American tourist assaults war hero at Buckingham Palace," and "Royal Guard breaks protocol to save veteran from cruel tourist." Tom's face appeared clearly in most of the pictures and videos. People from around the world were commenting, most of them angry at his behavior. "Your actions have consequences, Mr. Wilson," said Detective Roberts. "And it seems the whole world is watching now." Tom put his head in his hands. His dream vacation had turned into a nightmare, and he had only himself to blame. Tom spent the night in a holding cell at the police station. The small room had only a bed, toilet, and sink. He barely slept, thinking about how badly he had messed up. By morning, his anger had turned to shame. A police officer brought him breakfast, plain toast, and tea. "You have a visitor," the officer said, unlocking the cell door. Tom looked up in surprise. He didn't know anyone in London who would visit him. The officer led Tom to a meeting room where a woman in a sharp business suit waited. She had short gray hair and serious eyes. "Mr. Wilson, I'm Sarah Jenkins from the American Embassy," she said when Tom entered. "Please sit down." Tom sat across from her, relief washing over him. "Thank you for coming. Can you get me out of here? This whole thing is just a misunderstanding." Sarah's face remained stern. "Mr. Wilson, I've reviewed your case, including the videos. This is not a misunderstanding. Your actions were clearly deliberate." Tom's hope faded. "So you can't help me?" "The embassy can ensure you receive fair treatment under British law, but we cannot interfere with their legal process," she explained. "And frankly, you've created quite a diplomatic headache for us." She placed a tablet on the table showing American news headlines. "U.S. tourist disgraces nation at Buckingham Palace," and "American pushes British war hero, creates international incident." Tom's heart sank. "It's reached America already. It's everywhere, Mr. Wilson. Your face is on news sites worldwide." Meanwhile, George Harris returned to his modest home in a quiet London suburb. His daughter Jane was waiting for him, worried after seeing the news. "Dad, are you all right?" she asked, hugging him carefully. "I saw what happened on television." George patted her hand. "I'm fine, dear. Just a bit sore. The palace staff took very good care of me." They sat in George's small living room while he told her about his experience. Jane was shocked when he showed her the personal note from the king. "Dad, this is incredible," she said, reading the elegant handwriting. and they've invited you to the garden party. George smiled. It seems my years of service haven't been forgotten. The phone rang, and Jane answered it. Her eyes widened as she listened. Dad, it's the BBC. They want to interview you about what happened. George shook his head. I don't want to make a fuss. That young man made a mistake, but I don't want to add to his troubles. Back at the police station, Tom met with a court-appointed lawyer. The thin man with glasses explained Tom's options. The evidence against you is clear, Mr. Wilson, the lawyer said. The smartest course would be to plead guilty, express genuine remorse, and hope for leniency. Tom nodded slowly. What kind of punishment am I looking at? Given the circumstances, the victim's age and status, the public nature of the incident, and the clear intent shown in the videos, you could face up to 6 months in jail and a substantial fine. Tom's face paled. 6 months. I can't stay here that long. I'll lose my job, my apartment. There is one thing that might help, the lawyer suggested. If Colonel Harris were willing to make a statement on your behalf or accept a formal apology, the court might view that favorably. You think he would do that? Tom asked, doubtful. After what I did? I don't know, the lawyer replied honestly. But it might be worth trying. I could arrange a meeting if the colonel is willing. Tom thought about the elderly man he had pushed, the man he had disrespected without a second thought, the decorated war hero who had served his country for decades. I'd like to apologize to him, Tom said quietly. Not just to get a lighter sentence, but because I was wrong. I was completely wrong. The lawyer nodded and made a note. I'll see what I can do. 3 days after the incident, George Harris sat in his favorite armchair reading the morning newspaper. Every paper had stories about what happened at Buckingham Palace. Some reporters had even come to his house, but George politely asked them to leave. The phone rang, and George answered it. Colonel Harris, this is David Thompson, from the Crown Prosecutor's office, said a formal voice. Yes, how can I help you? George replied. Sir, the tourist who pushed you, Thomas Wilson, has requested to meet with you to offer a personal apology, Thompson explained. You are under no obligation to accept, of course. George was silent for a moment. Has he been in jail all this time? Yes, sir. He's facing serious charges and will likely be there for several more months unless the judge shows leniency. George thought about the angry young man who had pushed him. He remembered the look on Tom's face, not just anger, but something else. Maybe stress, disappointment. Whatever it was, George had seen that look before in young soldiers who were out of their depth. I'll meet with him, George decided, but not at the jail. Can it be arranged somewhere else? Given the circumstances, I think we could arrange something at our offices, Thompson replied, sounding surprised. The next day, Tom was escorted from his cell to a government building. He wore the same clothes he had on when arrested, now wrinkled and stained. The guards led him to a small conference room and removed his handcuffs. Wait here, one guard said, and behave yourself. Tom sat nervously, his hands shaking slightly. The door opened, and George Harris walked in slowly, using his cane. A court official and Tom's lawyer followed behind him. Tom stood up quickly. The old man looked smaller than he remembered, more fragile. George took a seat across from Tom, his face calm and unreadable. Mr. Wilson, George nodded politely. Colonel Harris, Tom said, his voice cracking slightly. Thank you for agreeing to see me. The room fell silent. Tom had rehearsed what to say, but now the words stuck in his throat. He looked down at his hands. I'm sorry, he finally said. What I did was wrong. There's no excuse for it. George studied Tom's face carefully. Why did you do it, young man? Why push an old man you don't even know? Tom's eyes filled with tears. I was angry. Not at you. At everything. This trip to London was supposed to be special. I saved for years to come here. But nothing went right. My hotel room was terrible. It rained every day. I lost my wallet. I couldn't afford the good tours. Then I saw the guards and I just wanted one good picture to show for my trip. He wiped his eyes with his sleeve. But that's no excuse. My mother raised me better than that. If she could see what I did. His voice trailed off. George nodded slowly. Disappointment can bring out the worst in people, but it's what we do after our mistakes that shows our true character. I'll accept whatever punishment I get, Tom said. I deserve it, but I wanted you to know I'm truly sorry. George looked at the court official. What exactly is he charged with? Assault on a vulnerable person, disorderly conduct, and causing a public disturbance, the official replied. He's facing up to 6 months in jail and possible deportation. George frowned. 6 months seems excessive for a momentary lapse of judgment, doesn't it? The official looked uncomfortable. The Crown takes these matters very seriously, especially given your status, sir. My status? George raised an eyebrow. I'm just an old soldier. A decorated war hero and former royal guard, the official corrected. George turned back to Tom. Young man, I have some questions for you, and I want honest answers. Can you do that? Tom nodded, wiping his eyes. Yes, sir. I'll tell you the truth. George leaned forward slightly. Do you have a criminal record? Have you ever hurt anyone before? No, sir, Tom answered. I've never been arrested before. I work as an accountant in a small firm in Texas. I've never been in any kind of trouble. What about your family? Are they worried about you? Tom looked down. My mom calls the embassy every day. She's sick with worry. My dad passed away 3 years ago, and she depends on me a lot. George nodded thoughtfully. What do you think you should have done differently that day? Tom thought for a moment. I should have been patient and respectful. I should have remembered that I was a guest in your country. Instead of pushing to the front, I should have just enjoyed being there. The guards aren't tourist attractions. They're soldiers doing their job. George seemed satisfied with these answers. He turned to the court official. I believe Mr. Wilson has learned his lesson. I don't wish to press charges against him. The official looked uncomfortable. Sir, it's not that simple. This is now a Crown matter. Your assault has been recorded, and there are many witnesses. Then I want to make a formal statement, George said firmly. I believe this young man made a terrible mistake, but I don't believe he deserves 6 months in jail for it. Tom looked up in surprise. Why would you help me after what I did? George smiled slightly. In my military career, I saw many young people make foolish mistakes under pressure. Some deserved harsh punishment. Others deserved a second chance. I believe you fall into the second category. He turned back to the official. I was not seriously hurt. The guard caught me before I fell. While Mr. Wilson's behavior was inappropriate, I think a fine and community service would be a more suitable punishment than jail time. The official made some notes. I'll convey your wishes to the prosecutor, Colonel Harris. But I can't make any promises. That's all I ask, George replied. Later that afternoon, George received a call from the prosecutor's office. After considering his statement and Tom's clean record, they had decided to reduce the charges. Tom would pay a fine, perform community service in London for 2 weeks, and then be allowed to return home with a warning on his record. When George's daughter Jane heard the news, she was confused. Dad, why did you help him? She asked. He could have seriously hurt you. George took off his reading glasses and smiled at his daughter. When I was a young soldier, I made my share of mistakes. One time, I accidentally damaged a senior officer's car. Instead of reporting me, he made me wash every vehicle in the motor pool for a month. It taught me more than any jail time would have. He put a hand on Jane's shoulder. Sometimes people deserve a second chance to make things right. The next day, Tom was released from jail. His lawyer met him outside the police station. You're a very lucky man, Mr. Wilson, the lawyer said. Colonel Harris went to bat for you. Not many people would do that for someone who pushed them. Tom nodded, still stunned by the turn of events. "What happens now?" "You'll pay a fine of £2,000. Then you'll work for the City Parks Department for 2 weeks picking up trash and cleaning public spaces. After that, you can go home." "And Colonel Harris?" Tom asked. "Can I thank him properly?" The lawyer checked his notes. "Actually, he left a message for you. He said if you want to thank him, you should meet him tomorrow at 10 a.m. at St. James's Park. He takes a walk there every morning." Tom felt a mixture of relief, gratitude, and shame. He had come to London hoping for amazing experiences to share with people back home. Now he had one, but not the kind he had planned. He wondered what George Harris wanted to tell them tomorrow. The next morning was bright and clear. Tom woke up early in his hotel room, where he had returned after being released. He showered and put on his cleanest clothes. He wanted to make a good impression on Colonel Harris. Tom arrived at St. James's Park 30 minutes early. The park was beautiful, with green grass, colorful flowers, and a large pond where ducks swam. People jogged or walked their dogs. Some tourists took photos of the scenery. At exactly 10 a.m., Tom saw George Harris walking slowly along a path using his cane. The old man wore a simple blue coat and a flat cap. Tom's heart beat faster as he approached. "Good morning, Colonel Harris," Tom said nervously. George looked up and smiled. "Ah, Mr. Wilson, right on time. Walk with me, will you?" They walked side by side along the path. For a few minutes, neither spoke. Tom noticed how other people nodded respectfully at George. Some even called him Colonel as they passed. "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" George finally said, looking at the sky. "Yes, sir, it is," Tom replied, surprised by the simple conversation. George pointed to a bench overlooking the pond. "Let's sit for a moment. These old legs don't move like they used to." They sat down, and George took a paper bag from his pocket. He pulled out pieces of bread and began throwing them to the ducks. He offered some to Tom. "Feed the ducks," George said. "It's quite relaxing." Tom took some bread and tossed it to the eager birds. He felt strangely peaceful despite his situation. "Mr. Wilson," George said after a while, "do you know why I asked you to meet me today?" Tom stopped throwing bread. "To tell me what a terrible person I am." George chuckled. "No, young man. If you were truly terrible, I wouldn't have helped reduce your charges." He turned to face Tom. "I wanted to meet you here because I believe you never really saw London. You were so busy trying to take pictures and push to the front that you missed the real beauty of this place." Tom looked around the park, seeing the ancient trees and the palace in the distance. George was right. He had been so focused on getting the perfect photos that he hadn't actually enjoyed anything. "Your community service starts tomorrow," George continued. "You'll be cleaning parks like this one. While you work, I want you to actually look at London. See its beauty. Notice the people. Appreciate where you are." Tom nodded slowly. "I will, sir. I promise." "And one more thing," George said, reaching into his coat pocket. He pulled out a small envelope and handed it to Tom. "Open it." Tom opened the envelope and found 2 tickets. His eyes widened when he read them. "These are tickets to a special tour of Buckingham Palace. The private area is not open to regular tourists." George smiled. "When you finish your community service, I'd like you to see the palace properly. These tickets are hard to get, but an old soldier like me still has some friends in high places." Tom stared at the tickets, then at George. "Why would you do this for me after what I did?" "Because sometimes the best way to teach respect is to show it," George replied simply. "And because I believe you've learned from your mistake." Tom's eyes filled with tears. "I don't deserve your kindness." "Perhaps not," George agreed. "But kindness isn't about what people deserve. It's about who we choose to be, even when others disappoint us." He patted Tom's shoulder. "Now finish feeding these ducks. Then I'll show you my favorite spots in the park, the places most tourists never see." Tom looked at the old soldier with new respect. The man he had pushed in anger was now teaching him about kindness and second chances. For the first time since arriving in London, Tom wasn't thinking about photos or social media. He was simply present, learning from a wise man who had every reason to hate him, but chose kindness instead. For the next 2 weeks, Tom worked in London's parks, picking up trash, emptying bins, and cleaning benches. The work was hard, especially when it rained. His hands got blisters, and his back hurt every night. But strangely, he didn't mind. Each day, Tom noticed more about London than he had in his first few days as a tourist. He saw how the morning light hit the old buildings. He watched children playing and office workers eating lunch on park benches. He heard street musicians playing beautiful music. He even began to recognize regular visitors to the parks. Every evening after work, Tom met George for dinner at small local restaurants that tourists rarely found. George showed Tom the real London, not just the famous places. They visited old bookshops, hidden gardens, and tiny cafes with the best tea in the city. "This tea is amazing," Tom said one evening, sipping from his cup. George smiled. "Better than that overpriced stuff they sell at tourist spots, isn't it?" Tom nodded. "Everything you've shown me is better than what I saw before." "That's because you're seeing London now, not just taking pictures of it," George replied. On Tom's last day of community service, his supervisor handed him a certificate of completion. "You did good work, Wilson," the supervisor said. "Most people just do the minimum, but you actually seem to care." Tom looked around the park he had been cleaning. "I do care. These parks matter to people. I've seen how much joy they bring." After changing out of his work clothes, Tom met George at Buckingham Palace for their special tour. Tom felt nervous as they approached the guards, the same type of guards he had disrespected 2 weeks earlier. "Colonel Harris," one guard said with a salute. "An honor to see you again, sir." George returned the salute. "At ease, Sergeant. This is my guest, Mr. Wilson." The guard looked at Tom with recognition in his eyes, but said nothing about the incident. He simply nodded and checked their special tickets. Inside the palace, a young woman in a formal uniform greeted them. "Colonel Harris, welcome back. I'll be your guide today." She led them through beautiful rooms filled with paintings, furniture, and history. Tom listened carefully to every word, asking thoughtful questions. This was nothing like his first visit when he had only cared about taking selfies. In one room, they saw James Blackwood, the guard who had caught George when Tom pushed him. James was off duty now, dressed in regular clothes. He was explaining guard procedures to a small tour group. When James saw George, he immediately came over. "Colonel Harris, good to see you, sir." "And you, Blackwood," George said warmly. "I wanted to thank you properly for your quick action that day." James nodded, then looked at Tom with surprise. "And Mr. Wilson, I didn't expect to see you here." Tom felt his face grow hot with shame. I'm here as Colonel Harris's guest. He's been teaching me about respect and second chances." James looked at George, who nodded slightly. "Well," James said after a moment, "I'm glad to hear that. Perhaps something good came from that day after all." As they continued the tour, George noticed Tom was unusually quiet. "Something on your mind, young man?" George asked. Tom sighed. "I just realized that I'm going home tomorrow, and I haven't bought a single souvenir or taken any pictures on this trip." George chuckled. "And is that a problem?" Tom thought about it, then smiled. "No, actually. I have something better than souvenirs." "And what's that?" George asked. "Real memories," Tom replied. "Lessons I'll never forget. And hopefully, a friend." George patted Tom's shoulder. "Indeed, young man. Indeed." As they walked through the magnificent halls of the palace, Tom realized this was the London experience he had wanted all along, not just seeing famous places, but connecting with them and the people who made the city special. On Tom's last morning in London, he packed his suitcase in his hotel room. His flight back to Texas would leave in 5 hours. He looked around the small room where his London adventure had both fallen apart and been put back together in unexpected ways. Tom had arranged to meet George for one final breakfast before heading to the airport. He took a taxi to a small cafe near George's home. When he arrived, George was already there, sitting at an outdoor table. "Right on time," George said with a smile as Tom sat down. "Did you sleep well?" "Not really," Tom admitted. "I kept thinking about going home and facing everyone. The videos of me pushing you are still online. My boss has seen them. My friends and family too." George nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, that will be difficult. But perhaps it's part of your journey." The waitress brought them tea and toast. For a few minutes, they ate in comfortable silence, watching London wake up around them. "I've been thinking," George said finally, "about how to help you with your return home." Tom looked up, surprised. "You've already done more than enough for me." George reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an envelope. "My daughter helped me make this. It's a short video we recorded yesterday." He handed Tom a small USB drive. "In this video, I explain what happened that day at the palace, but also what happened afterward. How you showed true remorse, worked hard during your community service, and learned from your mistake. I thought you might show it to your boss and others who only saw the first part of the story." Tom stared at the small drive in his hand, speechless. Tears filled his eyes. "Colonel Harris, I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," George replied. "Just remember what you learned here." Tom carefully put the USB drive in his pocket. "I will. I promise." As they finished breakfast, George handed Tom one more thing. A business card with his phone number and email address. "Keep in touch, young man," George said. "I'd like to know how you're doing back home." Tom nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "I will. And maybe you could visit Texas someday. I could show you around, the way you showed me London." George smiled. "I'd like that very much." They stood on the sidewalk outside the cafe, ready to say goodbye. Tom extended his hand, but George pulled him into a hug instead. "Remember," George said quietly, "we all make mistakes. It's what we do afterward that defines us." 3 months later, George received a large envelope in the mail from Texas. Inside was a letter from Tom and several photographs. The letter explained that Tom had returned home to face many angry people. He had shown George's video to his boss, his mother, and his closest friends. While some people still judged him harshly, others were moved by how the story had ended. Tom wrote that he had started volunteering at a local veterans' home on weekends. He included photos of himself working in the gardens there and playing chess with elderly veterans. In one picture, Tom wore a t-shirt that said, "Respect is earned." The last page of Tom's letter read, "Dear Colonel Harris, when I pushed you that day, I thought I was just pushing an old man. I didn't know I was pushing myself toward becoming a better person. Thank you for catching me when I was falling in my own way. The Royal Guard caught you from falling down, but you caught me from living a life without respect and kindness. I will never forget the lessons you taught me in London. Your friend, Tom." George smiled as he finished reading the letter. He carefully placed it in a box where he kept his most treasured possessions: old medals, photos of fallen comrades, and now, letters from a young man whose life had changed because of a moment of anger that led to an unexpected friendship. Sometimes, George thought, the worst moments can lead to the best changes if we're brave enough to learn from them.